Hey guys, tonight we wander into the glowing haze of Vietnam's night markets. The air smells like grilled corn, sizzling scallion oil, and something sweet that you never quite identify. Motorbikes putter by and the neon signs flicker just enough to feel like you've fallen into a VHS dream. And somewhere in the back corner of this labyrinth, under a plastic tarp and a single light bulb swinging like it's in a horror movie, you find the source of the soundtrack. Rows and rows of bootleg CDs. Brittany next to Trinkong Son, Linkin Park next to Kai Long, all remixed, mashed, and packaged by hand. This, somehow, is where it all begins. You probably won't survive this, at least not without getting one of those terribly compressed dance remixes stuck in your head forever. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past the pirated DVDs stacked in towers. Some are legitimate movies, sure, but others? Let's just say Titanic vs. Predator is not a real sequel. Still, it's not the films that grab your attention, it's the music. You hold up a jewel case with no label, just a sticker that reads, Non-stop Vina House, Tuen Tup Bei Fong. You don't even need to understand what it says, you just know you're about to hear something chaotic. Early 2000s Vietnam was like that. Bootlegs were everywhere, and everything was fair game. VCDs, MP3 discs with 200 songs compressed into scratchy, low bitrate chaos, ringtones sliced out of sad love songs and turned into disco intros. It was a lawless sonic jungle, and that's where remix culture snuck in. Not as high art, not even as music, but as a habit, a way of surviving sound in a country changing faster than it could track. Most of these early remixes weren't made by trained musicians. They were cooked up by kids with pirated software on creaky PCs and dusty internet cafes. Programs like Virtual DJ or Atomic's MP3 let you take two tracks, say a Vietnamese ballad and a Western techno hit, and mush them together with all the grace of a blender full of shrimp paste. The results were messy, but they were alive. Historians still argue whether this was real remix culture or just survival improvisation. But does it matter? You listen to a track where Me Tom is layered over a reggaeton beat, and somehow it works. It shouldn't. It does. Your ears adjust, and then you start nodding. There's a magic in the mess. Here's the thing. Vietnam's bootleg scene didn't just pirate. It localized. It Vietnamized. The backing beat might be Timbaland, but the vocals? Someone's cousin from Bien Hoa who covered it in Vietnamese with a karaoke mic. You remember standing there, holding that scratched up disc and thinking, who made this? You'd never know, but maybe that was the point. Remix culture in Vietnam was anonymous, spontaneous, and hyper-local. It moved like rumors, no author, just energy. And it wasn't just the streets. Cyber cafes played non-stop Bai Fong, club mixes, at max volume, even at 11 in the morning. Internet cafes doubled as impromptu clubs. Kids with headphones jacked into towers of speakers, clicking through folder after folder labeled DJ, non-stop, Dang Tuk Sang Nai, or Vina House, volume 9999. The mix was always the same and always different. Air horns, beat drops, the occasional motivational shout in English, let's go, baby. You couldn't escape it. You didn't want to. One fringe gem, a viral CD from 2005 simply titled DJ Garan. Yes, DJ Fried Chicken. No one knew who made it, but its remixes of Vietnamese folk songs into high BPM techno became the soundtrack of 1,000 rural weddings. Legend has it the DJ showed up once in a full chicken costume. Never seen again. This era wasn't about polish. It was about pulse. The rough edges weren't bugs. They were flavor. Bootleg culture made remixing feel like a game, like a dare. You didn't ask if you were allowed to remix something, you just did. You burned it to a disc. You gave it to a cousin. You played it loud enough that the neighbors would steal it through the walls. And somewhere in that sonic chaos, a culture formed. One that didn't respect genre boundaries. One that thought nothing of putting traditional bamboo flutes on top of Daft Punk. One where official meant nothing, and remix meant whatever you could get away with. You step away from the market now. The CD still in your hand, the beat still in your head. You don't know it yet, but this was Vietnam's remix culture in its rawest, weirdest, most wonderful form. Not born in clubs or studios, but on sidewalks, through cracked software, by people who didn't ask permission. And as you walk home, the beat from that disc keeps looping. So does the thought. What if this was the future? You're back in the city, but now it's late. The kind of late where everything's half shut. The streets smell of spent engine oil and grilled meat, and the air's thick with the buzz of cheap fluorescent lights. You slip off your shoes and step into one of Vietnam's greatest hidden laboratories of sound. Not a recording studio, but a karaoke lounge. The couches are overstuffed and a little sticky, and the walls are padded like a giant velvet coffin. There's a mic in every hand. Maybe someone's uncle is crooning a tearjerker from the 70s. Maybe your friend from uni just started beatboxing over a Nguyen ballad. And somehow, none of it is weird. Because here, karaoke isn't just about singing. It's about changing the song. It hits you halfway through the second chorus. Vietnamese karaoke culture is remix culture. Not remixing in the formal DJ software sense, but in the purest way possible. Taking something, bending it, making it yours. People flip keys, rewrite lyrics on the fly, stretch ballads into sagas. If you forget the words, just invent new ones. If you can't hit the high notes, sing it low, slow, broken, beautiful. Historians still argue whether karaoke should be considered an art form or an emotional outlet. But when you hear someone reinterpret a classic with entirely new emotional weight, it's hard not to lean toward art. Especially when the singer is crying by the second verse and still won't give up the mic. What's unique here is how normal remixing is in these spaces. There's no gatekeeping, no shame, just the thrill of making a song feel like your own. You remember a guy in Da Nang who sang a ballad entirely in bird noises and won the night. Or a woman in Hay who turned Happy Birthday into a Buddhist funeral chant on purpose. Everyone clapped. Hard. And it's not just the people doing the remixing. The machines themselves, the beloved battered karaoke machines, are accomplices. Many of them come preloaded with MIDI-style versions of songs, little uncanny valley echoes of the originals. It's like hearing a robot remember a tune from its childhood. And that weirdness, that's where the creativity sneaks in. You fiddle with the reverb dial, crank the echo. Suddenly, your off-key warble sounds like it's coming from inside a cathedral. Add a funky synth bassline preset. Now it's a disco. Toss in a beat from a totally different genre, like the time someone merged a Buddhist prayer track with a Vinna House beat drop. And now you've got something questionable, but unforgettable. It's easy to forget that karaoke wasn't invented in Vietnam. It came from Japan, got commercialized in Korea, but somehow, Vietnam turned it into a free-for-all remix temple. Here, karaoke isn't performance, it's participation. And every participant becomes a remixer by instinct. The lines between genres blur quickly. A wedding party might start with bolero. No one thinks it's strange, they just sing louder. Some karaoke lounges even offer remix packages. Special song selections that come pre-modified with altered arrangements. You haven't lived until you've heard a trap remix of Long Mea sung at 3 a.m. by a guy with 4 beers in his hand and no shirt on. That might be your Roman Empire. And there's this funny thing about the lyrics too. You notice how everyone kind of rewrites them? Not in big, obvious ways, but with little switches. A love song becomes about food. A breakup anthem turns into a weird joke about your cousin's recent haircut. One fringe legend, a karaoke duel in canto, where two rival families took turns remixing a folk song with progressively more savage roast lyrics. It ended in laughter and a pig roast, naturally. By the time you hit your fifth song, you realize something deeper is happening. These aren't just drunken sing-alongs. They're localizations, mini adaptations, culture being stretched like rice paper, thin, flexible, translucent, and unexpectedly strong. You glance over at the screen. The video is a montage of floating cherry blossoms, someone holding hands by a lake, and a bird that looks weirdly judgmental. None of it matches the song, but somehow it works. It adds something, like garnish on a dish that didn't ask for it, but appreciates it anyway. Karaoke, in Vietnam, becomes a kind of mirror. Not a clean mirror, but a funhouse one, warped and glittery. Through it, you see what people care about, what they laugh at, what they mourn, and what they're willing to change. Maybe the biggest twist? This casual karaoke remixing laid the groundwork for something much bigger. The boldness, the fluidity, the instinct to experiment. It trained a generation to remix before they even knew what remixing was. So when software finally got cheap and smartphones got loud, Vietnam didn't ask, "What is remix culture?" It asked, "Why not this?" You leave the karaoke lounge a little buzzed on rice wine and secondhand emotion. Your throat's sore, your heart's full, and the song stuck in your head? Yeah, you definitely changed half the lyrics, and you're proud of it.
You find yourself on a scratchy couch somewhere in suburban California flipping through cable TV in the mid-2000s. The air smells like fried spring rolls and scented candles. Grandma's watching Paris by Night in the background, and you swear the sound mixing on this show defies physics. One minute it's an operatic ballad, the next it's a techno remix with backup dancers dressed like glittery peacocks. You stare at the screen and wonder, is this the Vietnamese Super Bowl halftime show? But here's the twist. Paris by Night didn't just entertain, it taught millions of Vietnamese across the diaspora how to remix, literally. Not in the DJ sense, but in the cultural sense. It took old songs and gave them disco beats. It mashed Western styles with Auzai. It was remix culture wrapped in sequins, and for many it was the only place they ever heard Vietnamese language collide with modern production. Vietnamese lyrics over R&B beats, traditional melodies sung like Mariah Carey on an espresso bender. Some call it chaotic, you just call it formative. Twee Na Productions, the company behind Paris by Night, was the secret lab of early Vietnamese remix aesthetics. They understood something deep, nostalgia sells, but only if you can sneak a bass drop in the back. Historians still debate whether Paris by Night preserved tradition or diluted it, but sitting there remote in hand you realize it remixed tradition. And that was more powerful. One infamous episode, a singer starts a solemn Kai Leung piece, slow, mournful, steeped in historical drama. But halfway through, the lighting shifts, drums kick in, and suddenly it's a full EDM drop with laser visuals. You don't know whether to laugh or cry, so you do both. And behind all this, diaspora youth with one foot in America and the other in ancestral Vietnam. Kids who grew up with Usher and Laqueen, they started experimenting first with mixtapes burned onto CDRs, then with GarageBand, then on YouTube. Paris by Night was their textbook and permission slip in Vietnamese American communities. Talent shows at churches or Tet festivals often featured bizarre but glorious mashups. A girl in Auzai raps Missy Elliott. A boy with spiky hair sings a French ballad that becomes a dance remix halfway through. None of it feels forced, it's just how remixing works when you've grown up in a cultural blender. Eventually, some of these remixers grew up and turned pro. You meet one such figure, a Vietnamese-Canadian DJ who went by the handle DJ Crazy Fish. His claim to fame? Remixing Vietnamese lullabies into UK garage tracks. You find his SoundCloud, it's still up, and listen to a remix of Zuo Vizo. That makes you want to both cry and rave. Quirky footnote? He once released an entire EP using only samples from Paris by Night laugh tracks, applause breaks, and vocal warm-ups. It's weirdly good, also completely illegal, but hey, remix culture was never about following rules.
There's also something about the visual aesthetic. Those Paris by Night stages with digital backdrops of waterfalls, palaces, cherry blossoms, and inexplicably the Eiffel Tower. Every detail screamed Vietnamese, but make it Broadway. This mix and match approach spilled into music naturally. Aesthetic and audio began to bleed together. You might laugh now, but the sequin performers of Paris by Night were remix trailblazers. They showed what was possible when no one told you to pick one style. They introduced the idea that you could wear a traditional kondong and still belt your heart out over a trance beat. And the fans? Oh, they lapped it up. Pirated DVDs got passed from cousin to cousin. YouTube uploads got millions of views. Even in Vietnam, where the show wasn't broadcast officially, kids watched bootleg rips in secret, absorbing the sonic schizophrenia like musical vitamins. Some of those kids would grow up to become the very remixers you'll meet later on. Names like Masu, Oren, and Hieu Tu Hai. But the DNA was already planted. Paris by Night wasn't just a show, it was a cultural USB stick, plugged straight into the global Vietnamese imagination. And the show didn't stop at the screen. At Vietnamese weddings abroad, DJs would drop a slow dance remix of a Paris by Night classic. Aunties would cry, teens would sway, someone's dad might even attempt a shuffle. Remixing was emotional, messy, and deeply, deeply communal. At its core, the diaspora taught the motherland something vital, that culture doesn't have to stay still. It can dance, morph, loop, and glow in the dark. You lean back now, the TV static fading into your ears, and realize you've just witnessed something radical. Vietnamese identity evolving in real time, not erasing the past, just adding beats to it.
You hear it before you see it, a muffled bass line pulsing through the paper-thin walls of a Hanoi apartment block. Inside, a teenager hunched over a clunky PC with mismatched speakers is dragging waveforms across a screen. The room smells like instant noodles and ambition. There's a fan whirring loudly, but it can't compete with the track he's building, an unholy fusion of a folk ballad from his parents' CD collection and a trap beat he downloaded off a dodgy forum. Welcome to the bedroom studio, where Vietnamese remix culture gets its next growth spurt. The teen's name? Masu, or at least that's the alias he uploads under. His real name isn't important right now. What matters is that he's part of a generation raised on YouTube, auto-tune, and an internet connection that cuts out whenever it rains. He isn't just remixing music, he's remixing his reality. You scroll through his early uploads. Bua Yu Remix, Tuyum, Demi Noicha Mange. Each one blends something old and something sharply modern. The voices are unmistakably Vietnamese, soft, poetic, sometimes a little nasal, and the beats, pure international swagger. EDM, trap, future bass, a little Ariana Grande, a little Temple Bell. You get whiplash, but in a good way. Historians still debate whether this bedroom-born wave of remixers had roots in formal music theory or just happy accidents. Some say Masu and his peers were Vietnam's first digital native producers. Others call them lucky, you call them inevitable. Because by the mid-2010s, all the ingredients were there. Free software like FL Studio, tutorials on YouTube, pirate copies of Ableton Live, and a deep well of folk melodies, karaoke memories, and Paris by Night inspiration to draw from. Add to that a TikTok generation hungry for sounds that slapped, and bam! Remix culture goes full supernova. You remember the first time you heard Tuyem. It started like a ghost story, plucked Duntron strings, haunting female vocals, and then bam, the beat drops like a curtain falling on a haunted opera. The contrast was addicting. You couldn't just listen once, it made your brain light up like a pinball machine. Bedroom producers like Masu weren't trying to impress industry gatekeepers. They weren't even trying to go viral. They just wanted to make something that sounded cool. They had nothing to lose and everything to experiment with. And when Vietnamese Facebook pages started sharing their tracks with captions like Nghe Lang Yen, listen once, addicted forever, things took off. You scroll down and notice the comments. Thousands. Teenagers from across Vietnam and the diaspora tagging each other, begging for MP3 downloads, making memes out of lyrics, turning remixes into inside jokes. You realize the music isn't just playing, it's being lived. One fringe example, a 17-year-old producer who called himself DJ Badao remixed a Vietnamese math tutorial into a Vina House track. It was meant as a joke. It hit 3 million views in a week. Students started playing it before exams. Some said it helped them remember formulas. Others just danced the anxiety away. And this wasn't just a Saigon or Hanoi thing. Remixers popped up in Da Nang, Can Tho, Buon Ma Thuột. Anywhere a kid had a laptop and enough Wi-Fi to upload a file. Some mixed indie folk, others spliced stand-up comedy into EDM drops. The scene was chaotic, decentralized, and deliciously weird. And the visuals? Equally homemade.
Most remixes were posted to YouTube with low-res images of anime girls, slow-motion raindrops, or random Google images of Vietnamese temples. Some had no visuals at all, just a black screen and a wall of comments. But somehow that lo-fi presentation added to the appeal. It felt like a secret, like you were in on something not everyone understood. And slowly, the music crept beyond YouTube. Remixers like Masu started landing gigs, not just in clubs, but on movie soundtracks, TV ads, even official music videos. The establishment began to take notice, and instead of pushing back, they leaned in. Still, purists grumbled. They said remix culture was diluting Vietnamese music, that it was too Western, too derivative, too reliant on synths and beat drops. But that missed the point. Remix culture wasn't about replacing tradition, it was about extending it, with 808s and glitchy transitions. Remember the karaoke lady from before? Her spirit lived on in every bedroom producer. Because these remixers weren't erasing the past. They were playing with it. They were looping it, sampling it, slowing it down until it became something new. And you? You find yourself humming a line from a remix you heard only once. It's stuck now, embedded like a rice grain in your memory. That's the magic. You don't always remember the producer, but you never forget the feeling. So you close the tab, lean back in your chair, and imagine all those kids in dim bedrooms across Vietnam, headphones on, noodles half-eaten, chasing that perfect drop, not to become famous, just to make something strange and beautiful. You blink, and now you're inside a phone. Not metaphorically, you're scrolling, endlessly. The screen casts a faint blue glow on your half-asleep face. You're barely awake, but your thumb is an Olympic athlete. Swipe, swipe, pause, laugh, swipe. You're on TikTok, and Vietnamese remix culture just smacked you in the ears. It starts innocently enough, a rice harvesting POV video set to a haunting remix of Bao Dat Mei Troy. But the beat? It's warped, slowed to molasses, and paired with the soft clicks of sandals on wet soil. Suddenly, you're not watching someone farm, you're feeling something ancient and brand new at the same time. This is the new temple of Vietnamese remix culture. Short form, bite-sized, and aggressively catchy. You're not just listening to remixes anymore, you're living inside them. TikTok changed everything. It lowered the bar so low, it buried it. You didn't need fancy equipment or deep music theory. All you needed was a sound, an edit app, and a vibe. That's how Vietnamese TikTok turned into a remix laboratory, one where audio mutates faster than you can hit like. Historians still argue whether TikTok counts as music culture at all. Is a 12-second meme remix of a breakup ballad real music? You don't care. Because it made you feel something, and it looped in your brain for days. The most iconic format? The speed up plus reverb combo. A classic Vietnamese love song gets pitched higher, doused in fake echo, and suddenly it becomes the soundtrack for a breakup cooking tutorial, or someone folding laundry, or a montage of a guy staring out the bus window, dramatically chewing sunflower seeds. There's also slow plus sad mode, where they drag a bouncy bolero hit into slow motion and play it over footage of someone getting ghosted. You hear Trung Vu's voice drop an octave, and suddenly it's the saddest thing you've ever heard. Why does it work? No one knows. Maybe physics. Maybe heartbreak. But it doesn't stop there. TikTok remixes spill over into memes, challenges, and viral trends. A single remixed line from a comedy sketch, En oi em met qua, gets paired with a distorted ambient beat, then reused in everything from skincare routines to existential screamcore. And somehow, it fits every mood. One Fringe remix went ultra-viral. Someone took a public service announcement about dengue fever and layered it over a Vina house drop. It was meant as satire, but it slapped so hard, DJs started playing it in clubs. The government didn't know whether to ban it or approve it. It became both awareness campaign and party anthem. You pause on a TikTok where a guy makes a remix entirely from household sounds, chopping lemongrass, fish sauce sizzling, and people do. Over and over, remixing becomes reflexive. You see it in captions like Meme hwa amyak, music turned meme, and remix hoivoli malai hopli, a remix that makes no sense yet makes perfect sense. TikTok turns these phrases into mini slogans of a generation. You zoom out for a moment and realize these aren't just kids messing around. They're curating a culture of reinterpretation, taking every song, soundbite, or nostalgic clip and seeing how far it can bend before it breaks. Sometimes it does break. Other times it becomes the new national anthem for a week. And even artists adapt. Singers now release songs designed to be remixed. The chorus gets written with a TikTok loop in mind. Labels include stems for remixers. Some artists even collab with fan remixers directly. The line between fan and pro producer has basically dissolved, like Boonba and Hot Broth. You think back to your own 50 page, For You page. That one remix of Chi Kunyam you heard 5 times in a row. The one with the lo-fi filter and sad anime boy. You hated it. Until you didn't. Now it's your internal soundtrack when your bubble tea order gets delayed. That's what TikTok does. It hijacks nostalgia, glitches it, speeds it up, and hands it back to you like, here, this is yours now. Remix responsibly. Or don't. No one's watching. Everyone's scrolling. So you close the app. The audio still plays in your head. You feel both 16 and 106. And somewhere in that dizzy overlap of remix, meme, and memory, you realize this is no longer just a trend. It's a culture, and it's yours. You wake up to the sound of soft bamboo flutes drifting through your headphones, layered over a lazy, looping lo-fi beat. There's a crackle, like vinyl, or maybe it's rain. A woman's voice sings gently in a style that doesn't quite belong to pop, rap, or R&B. It sounds older, ancient, almost. But the bass line? That's pure 2020s. Welcome to the unexpected marriage of Katru and chill hop, a sonic union no one predicted but everyone suddenly needed. Katru, for the uninitiated, is Vietnam's centuries-old ceremonial vocal music. Think poetry meets performance, full of complex rhythms, sliding tones, and haunting plucked string instruments like the dan dai. They used to be performed in royal courts or spiritual ceremonies, definitely not something you'd expect to hear while sipping iced coffee in a hip Dalat cafe. But now? It's all over your Study Vibes playlist, looped, layered, mellowed out, like a ghost from the Lei dynasty just got a SoundCloud account. And that's the magic of modern Vietnamese remix culture. It doesn't throw away the old stuff, it slow cooks it. You click play on another track, a remix of a Katru poem sung by an elderly performer, her voice raw and reedy, backed by soft trap drums and muted piano chords. The contrast is jarring, and then strangely perfect. You feel your shoulders drop, your brain slows down. This isn't music for the club, this is music for lying still and feeling everything at once. Historians still argue whether this kind of remixing preserves or repackages tradition. Purists worry it dilutes sacred art into background noise, but others, especially younger Vietnamese, argue it keeps the art alive, breathing it into new spaces. You lean into the sound. There's no obvious hook, no drop, just layers. Soft vocals, warm tones, the occasional vinyl pop. It's like someone bottled nostalgia and poured it over lo-fi beats. What's wild is how global this vibe has become. There are producers in Poland, Indonesia, and Mexico using Vietnamese Katru samples, not as token world music flavor, but as the core of the track. One Brazilian lo-fi artist even sampled a Waycourt music chant and labeled it Sad Boy Emperor Tight Beat. The comments, half in Portuguese, half in Vietnamese, all deeply emotional. And the visuals that come with these tracks? Animated girls staring at rain through windows, lanterns glowing over rivers, slow shots of Hanoi alleyways at dusk. The aesthetic is quiet, meditative, beautifully melancholic. It matches the sound perfectly. Fringe fact for you. One producer, known online only as On Lo-Fi 99, released an entire EP composed entirely of Katru recordings, but only using syllables that ended in the letter M. Why? Because it sounds soft, he wrote in his caption. The EP was called People loved it. Another producer mixed lullabies from different Vietnamese regions, layering them into a dreamy lo-fi suite. You recognize the melody your grandmother used to hum while cooking, but here it is, looped over synth pads and ambient forest sounds. The past is not gone, it's just vibing now. There's something almost medicinal about it. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. This isn't the remix chaos of In a House or meme-fueled TikTok. This is the opposite. This is restoration, reflection. A kind of sonic acupuncture for the soul. And it's not just Katru getting this treatment. You've got Chao, Shum, even Nhan Nhạc, all these traditional Vietnamese musical forms getting lo-fi makeovers. It's like remixers are digging through the attic of national memory, brushing off forgotten songs and giving them a soft glow-up. You remember one cafe in Hoi An that only plays Vietnamese lo-fi. The barista, wearing a non-la hat ironically, told you this is like time travel with a beat. You didn't argue. One debate that still lingers. Is this remixing for Vietnamese listeners, or is it just aesthetic bait for lo-fi playlists? Are the producers preserving culture or commodifying it? No one really agrees. But most people seem to feel something, and maybe that's the point. Because when you press play on a remix like this, you're not just hearing sound, you're hearing lineage. The breath of the ancestors chopped and screwed into a calm.
And let's not pretend this is all delicate reverence. Some remixers have real fun with it, like the viral lo-fi wrong wrong track that turned a traditional children's game chant into a hypnotic beat complete with pitch-shifted laughter and reverb-heavy drum pads. It shouldn't work. It absolutely does. You take a deep breath. The track's ending now. A final note from the Don Trong fades out like a sigh. You feel grounded, centered, and also kind of cool. That's the remix effect. It surprises you, it sneaks in, and suddenly you're in love with something that technically predates your great-great-grandparents. You're blinking against the strobe lights now, eyes adjusting to a room that smells like citrus-scented fog and cheap cologne. It's a nightclub in Saigon, half lit, half chaotic, and fully alive. The DJ raises one hand like a preacher, and you brace yourself for a drop. But wait, that melody coming in, that's not EDM, that's bolero. Yes, bolero. The melancholic, old-school heartbreak ballads of Vietnam's yesteryear, once reserved for wedding halls, rainy day radio, and your grandparents' karaoke CDs, are now making bodies move under laser lights. You're not hallucinating. This is a thing, a very Vietnamese thing. Bolero has officially hit the club. The beat slaps, the vocals ache, and somehow, the sorrow makes the dancing better. This is what happens when remix culture decides to stop being ironic and starts being sublime. You're probably wondering who thought it was a good idea to mix songs about doomed love with electronic dance music. Well, no one exactly decided. It just happened. Slowly, organically. Some say it started with wedding DJs who mashed things together out of necessity. 3 generations in one room, one dance floor, and only 20 minutes before the bong hoi arrives. Grandma wants Yaolin, the teens want Vina House. The DJ says, why not both? Historians still debate whether this moment, the Bolero remix moment, is a sign of cultural decay or cultural genius. You lean toward genius, mainly because your feet won't stop moving and your heart kind of hurts in a good way. You recognize the voice. It's Chaylin, the king of the tear-soaked bolero. But under his velvet sorrow, the beat thumps. It's as if your emotions were being played at 128 BPM. A heartbreak anthem for the dance floor. And it works. The magic of bolero in the club is in the dissonance. The lyrics are about betrayal, longing, lost youth, often delivered in slow, trembling tones. But the remix says, feel it all, and dance anyway. There's a kind of rebellion in that, crying and moving, grieving and grooving. Vietnamese remixers weren't interested in polishing away the sadness. They embraced it, they looped it, they turned it into fuel. You remember one remix called Con Dung Sua MD non-stop version, where the original song's intro plays unaltered, delicate. It's morning now. Not the loud kind of morning, but the hush that happens just before a city wakes up.
You're sipping café suada in a narrow alley, listening to something soft, but distinctly modern, coming from a speaker tucked behind a flower pot. You recognize the lyrics. They're from an old Kailuang opera. But the voice, young, airy, and the beat underneath, chill trap, maybe. Something with a lot of space. Welcome to the new frontier of remix culture. Collaborations across time. The old guard meets the new school, not in a battle, but in a duet. This isn't about mashups anymore. It's about dialogue. You're listening to a conversation between generations, layered note by note. It starts with projects like the Roots Remix and Desan Bai, where young Vietnamese artists take old folk songs, classical operas, and even pre-war pop ballads, then rebuild them with sleek, modern production. The past isn't sampled as a novelty. It's invited to speak. Historians still debate whether these works count as true collaborations or just respectful theft. But once you hear a Kailuang vocalist harmonize with a bedroom indie singer from Dalat, the debate stops mattering. Something's working. Take the track Honque, Soul of the Homeland, a surprising sleeper hit that layered 1970s Kailuang vocals over synth pads, trap hi-hats, and finger-snapped rhythms. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. Millions of streams, thousands of TikToks, your aunt, your cousin, your barista, all humming it. The secret isn't just the production, it's the tone. These tracks don't just remix, they respect. They lean in. They ask the old voices, what are you still trying to say? And then they answer with a beat. You remember one fringe masterpiece, a young rapper from Hai Phong named Ran Kap Due. Yes, that's Snake Bite's Tail, remixed an archival field recording of a funeral chant from Roro Bac Ninh and turned it into a minimalist spoken word piece. It had no chorus, no hook, just two voices across time, trading pain. You listened with your eyes closed. And it's not just music. Visual artists and directors are getting involved too. They're creating animated music videos that blend black and white photos of old Hanoi with glitch art and kinetic typography. One video overlays traditional water puppets with neon 3D graphics. The puppets twerk, and somehow, it's beautiful. You scroll past a short film on Instagram, a woman walking through present-day Saigon, listening to a remixed Kailuang track on headphones. The past bleeds in through flashes. Old storefronts reappear, the traffic turns to bicycles, and her clothes shift with the beat.
There's a beautiful tension in these projects, fragility. You hear the warble of a dusty cassette sample from 1962, and then the clean shimmer of an 808 bass underneath. The imperfection is the point. The old voice cracks, the new beat floats. Together they hold something heavier than either could carry alone. One particularly moving track features a looped recording of a grandmother reciting a lullaby, layered gently under a soft rap about growing up in the diaspora. No effects, just honesty. The comments are full of, "This made me cry in my grab," and "I sent this to my mom, she cried too." And suddenly you understand, remixing isn't always about energy. Sometimes it's about empathy. This new wave of Vietnamese remix artists doesn't treat tradition like a museum piece. They treat it like a collaborator. They ask permission, they experiment, they fail, they try again. And when it lands deep. You hear echoes of this in albums by artists like Suboy, Vu, Hop Rocks, and even in the ambient works of lesser-known producers. A single pluck of the Dan Trang here, a phrase borrowed from a lullaby there. It's subtle, intentional, poetic. And these collaborations don't stop at the audio. Live shows now feature intergenerational performances, young DJs spinning behind seasoned Kailung performers, laser lights meet Lotus dance, TikTok teens next to Aozai-clad elders swaying in the same space. Some of these concerts are modest affairs, held in art cafes or cultural centers. Others are massive, like Monsoon Music Festival, which now proudly programs remix sets that blend electronic music with Vietnamese traditional vocals. The crowd goes silent when the old songs come in, then erupts when the beat hits. And just like that, the remix becomes a ritual. Not to forget, not to mock, but to remember louder. You take the last sip of your coffee. The city around you is awake now. Scooters rev, radios chatter, the world moves. But in your ears, the song still plays. A grandmother's voice, a young producer's beat, and the space between them. That's where you live now. It's late again. You're alone now, headphones snug, eyes flickering with the blue light of your laptop screen. This time, you're not watching music videos or scrolling TikTok. You're on YouTube, diving into the deep, strange, beautiful hole of Vietnamese fan remixes. Welcome to the wildlands of the internet, where remix culture truly roams free. There's no club lighting here, no corporate funding, no glossy marketing. Just raw creativity, unlicensed audio, and sheer digital chaos. The realm of fan remixes is equal part. What you get is a 4-minute audio journey that somehow fuses a Vietnamese streamer's rants, snippets of a Chinese period drama dub, and a beat so hard it could wake the dead. It makes no sense, and yet it absolutely slaps. Historians still debate whether this form of remix, fan-made, unauthorized, anarchic, is even music. Some call it digital folklore. Others call it memecore. You call it addictive. And you're not alone. These videos rack up tens of millions of views. Some creators like Natgi, Long.C, or Vinbeat have become legends in their own right, shaping Vietnamese remix culture from their bedrooms with nothing but stolen samples, auto-tune, and vibes. The secret sauce? Relatability. These remixes pull from your life. That viral voice memo your friend recorded on Zalo. That game streamer yelling "Kong" after losing a match. That one-liner your cousin keeps saying from an old Kai Luang clip. If it exists, someone's remixed it. You remember one legendary piece, a remix that sampled a man crying during a reality show elimination and turned it into a future garage track. The drop hits right as the man sobs,
Em không xứng đáng.
It's absurd. It's perfect. It's us. Another fringe gem, a parody remix titled Lee K Bone. Jersey Club, but make it existential. A traditional children's song transformed into a screeching, glitchy, heartbreak anthem. The top comment reads, Nearby nai song te ming vu chite mot moiting ao chu tan ton tai. After listening to this, I feel like I just broke up with an imaginary relationship. That's the thing. These remixes know they're weird. They lean into it. They warp time, humor, heartbreak, nostalgia, even boredom. Sometimes they're funny. Sometimes they hit too close. 1 minute you're laughing. The next, you're teary over a clip of an old woman yelling at a market stall, auto-tuned into a lament for lost youth. It's not just music. It's emotional remixing. And it evolves fast. You notice how meme remixes often follow current events. A political gaffe becomes a club banger. A celebrity scandal turns into a lo-fi bop. A weather report from VTV1 suddenly has a Jersey Club beat behind it, and now it's the background music for thousands of Gen Z dance clips. You wonder, where does it end? Then you find an entire YouTube channel that remixes court trial audio. Yes, actual courtroom recordings. One remix turns a theft case testimony into a haunting minimalist house track. The repeated line, Bikao en cup mot goi mi hao hao. The defendant stole 1 pack of hao hao noodles. It sounds like confessional poetry. You don't know whether to laugh or apologize to the universe. And this world is fiercely participatory.
There's no barrier to entry. Some fan remixers start by using CapCut or Audacity, free tools with janky interfaces and barely there reverb. Others get more advanced with FL Studio or Ableton, but most stay scrappy. The charm lies in the imperfection. And remixers often collaborate, swapping audio stems, remixing each other's remixes, creating endless chains of mutated songs. You start with a cover of a ballad, end up with a chiptune version featuring cat meows and sounds of boiling water. It's musical Dadaism, but somehow it captures something honest, something deeply Vietnamese. The need to poke fun at everything, even pain, especially pain. One remix of a breakup voicemail, complete with background traffic noise and the beep of a noodle cart, has been labeled Qua Tut de Lazia, too real to be fake. You don't even know who's talking in the clip, but you feel like it happened to you. Even educational content gets the remix treatment. Kids remix math teachers. Students remix traffic safety PSAs. There's a viral track of a geography lecture remixed into a trance anthem, complete with a drop that yells, Dong Bang Song Ku Long La Vualu. The Mekong Delta is the rice bowl. You laugh, but you also remember it. That's the genius. And these remixers, they're not asking for permission. They're asking if you felt that beat. And if you did, they'll post 3 more versions tomorrow. You close the tab, your ears ringing with the sound of someone auto-tuned to say, Sin Loi Em Ang Io Con Ka Mop. Don't ask. It made sense in context. And you realize, remix culture has become more than music. It's a language, a coping mechanism, a meme that won't die. It's us, looped and pitched and reverb-drenched, saying, this is how we feel, and we're going to make it sound ridiculous. Until it makes sense. You're outside now, in a sweaty alley, lit by nothing but the glow of fluorescent street signs and the red taillights of a grab bike pulling away. Somewhere behind a rolling metal gate, a subwoofer kicks into life. The bass rattles a puddle. You stumbled into the stomping heart of Vina House. Not the glossy, big club Vina House. This is the underground kind. The bootleg birthday party kind. The kind with plastic stools and watermelon seeds scattered across the floor. And what's playing? A remix of Noi La Oi, pitched 2 keys higher than normal, looping the same 5 seconds on repeat. It shouldn't work, but your feet are tapping. Vina House is Vietnam's signature electronic genre. It's part EDM, part speed garage, part karaoke after 5 Red Bulls. And at the center of it, the remix. Not just as a tool, but as a religion. You duck your head inside. The party's already roaring. There's no DJ booth, just a cracked laptop perched on a cardboard box. A fan turns slowly overhead like it's watching you dance. Someone's uncle, wearing flip-flops and a gold chain, nods to the beat with terrifying precision. The track changes. Now it's a remix of a pop song from 2007. Synths squeal, the kick drums slap, everyone cheers. Vina House doesn't fade in, it attacks. The genre exploded in the 2010s, with clubs across Vietnam adopting it as their default soundtrack. But the real energy lives in the remixes, those YouTube edits labeled Non-Stop 2023 Bay Len Troy. They often feature ridiculous track lists, a K-pop hook, a Vietnamese rap bar, a trance build-up, and suddenly a folk song drops in, like a distant relative showing up uninvited, and everyone screams in joy. Historians still debate whether Vina House is a homegrown innovation or just Eurodance on too much caffeine. But ask any Vietnamese youth and they'll tell you, this is our sound. The most iconic remix structure? The build, drop, build. Start with a familiar lyric, raise the BPM,
Loop the hook, slam a Vina House beat under it, then bring it all back again. It's predictable, shameless, and completely euphoric. There's also the drop, laugh, drop format, where between pounding bass drops you insert a meme audio, like a chicken cluck or a dad saying "Wo allo" just to make the crowd lose it. It's dumb. It's brilliant. And the visuals that accompany these YouTube bangers? Usually spinning text in rainbow fonts. Niela fo, feel the high. Guaitaban, party to the edge. Or just hangyan bailan, with a bunch of fire emojis. No one knows who makes these. They appear, go viral, and vanish. Like ghostly rave flyers in the wind. The job rejection you pretended didn't hurt? Here, they get looped into 135 BPM and burned off under red lights and cold beer. One fringe Vina House legend? A remix called An Oi Ole Bay version that became the official, unofficial graduation song for a dozen high schools in Da Nang. Yes, a melancholy ballad about heartbreak turned into a Vina House anthem to cry dance out your teenage years. You watch the videos, students in Ao Dai spinning wildly, crying, laughing, hugging. It's chaotic and perfect. And while the remixers behind these tracks often go unnamed, their sounds circulate like folklore. A single Dung Lai voice drop becomes instantly recognizable. A beat tag, Vutru Remix Govup, carries more weight than a record label. But even as it parties, Vina House also remembers. Many remixes sample old Kai Luang lines, pre-war poetry, or the legendary croon of Ken Lee. These aren't ironic inclusions, they're emotional time bombs. You don't know when they'll drop, but when they do, you feel it in your chest. And while mainstream radio mostly ignores Vina House, the people don't. It thrives on YouTube, in street parties, at underground events, and inside Bluetooth speakers zip-tied to the back of motorbikes. If you hear it coming down your street, just know, a remix is near. Even abroad, Vietnamese communities throw Vina House nights. In Berlin, Paris, Sydney, you'll find pop-up clubs or house parties where the walls shake with homemade tracks. Diaspora kids blending the rice fields with the rave. No gatekeeping, just vibes. You step back out into the alley, your ears ringing, your shirt a little damp, your heart somehow lighter. That's what Vina House remixes do. They're not subtle, they're not polished, but they say, you are allowed to feel everything at once. Joy, nostalgia, confusion, and catharsis. And you do. You're back online now, sprawled on your bed, rabbit-holing through threads on Reddit and Vietnamese forums. But this time, you're not looking for the next viral remix. You're chasing something deeper. Those strange, haunting audio experiments that don't fit anywhere else. The ones you only find at 2 a.m., uploaded by users with names like remix.mut.ngu.mp3 and profile pics that look like cursed album covers. Welcome to the experimental underground of Vietnamese remix culture, the secret gardens where the weird stuff grows. These aren't your typical TikTok bangers or wedding party stompers. No Vina House drops, no meme jokes, just atmosphere, texture, and confusion. Think, traditional folk instruments looped backwards, field recordings from pagodas, broken radio transmissions layered under melancholy raps. It's not even music in the traditional sense, it's sound art. You click play on a track called Ngu Quen Tren Dai FM Reo Fu, fell asleep on a moss-covered FM station. It opens with the sound of crickets. Then comes an elderly voice reading poetry from the... At 042, a single, den wet string pluck echoes through the fog. You don't know why, but you feel seen. These remixers aren't chasing likes. They're chasing vibe, and sometimes grief, or silence, or memory. Historians still debate whether this is a continuation of Vietnam's oral storytelling tradition or a mutation born of internet insomnia. Either way, it feels sacred, even when it sounds like broken machines. You land on an entire Bandcamp label called Kong Zon Lang, dedicated to post-remix Vietnamese ambient. Their tagline, Nghe Trung Luc No Nha, for listening when you miss home. It's poetic. It's accurate. The tracks are mostly unsearchable.
Some are 17 minutes long. One is just the ambient noise of a noodle shop at dawn. One fringe release, Ambengue, the rural negative, mixes the sound of frogs croaking in flooded rice fields with layers of motorbike revs, whispered diary entries, and deep bass you feel more than hear. It's unsettling. It's genius. You can't explain it, but it sounds like homesickness. And then there are the visual accompaniments. Grainy VHS footage of village life, overlaid with neon subtitles and vaporwave effects. The old is distorted, the new is ghostly. You can't tell what's real anymore, but that's the point. These remixers aren't trying to clarify Vietnam's identity. They're trying to show you how blurry it's always been. You scroll through a blog post from one anonymous artist. Chong Toi remix Kong Phai Denyai. Chong Toi remix Denyo. We remix not to dance. We remix to remember. That one sticks with you. And yet, even here, among the sound collages and ambient memories, you find humor. One experimental track samples an old driver's ed cassette and loops the line, "But si nyan try, turn on your left signal," into an 8-minute meditative trance. The effect is bizarrely calming. You never thought traffic rules could soothe your anxiety. Some of these tracks use AI too. One artist trained a voice model on Kailung singers and fed it completely new computer-generated lyrics about growing up in a country that doesn't exist anymore. The result? Beautiful, eerie, uncanny. A song you've never heard, but one that somehow feels like childhood. There's debate in the scene, of course. Purists call this emo noise. Others call it avant-garde remixing. But you can't deny the impact. Even mainstream musicians are quietly borrowing from this space, sampling rain sounds, overlaying whispers, embracing awkward silences. You think back to that one experimental mix called Derm Nu Kong Sao, a night with no stars. No beat, just layers of forgotten things. Cassette rewind clicks, static, echoes of water dripping. You don't listen to it, you sit inside it. You see diaspora remixers, kids raised in France, Canada, the US, using these experimental styles to connect back. One Montreal-based artist samples his grandma speaking in Bac Ninh dialect, then layers it with lo-fi field recordings from his last trip to Hanoi. The track is called Toi Lam Gio Day, What Am I Doing Here? You feel that. Another Vietnamese American producer created an EP where every track is built around voicemails his mom left him. In one, she says, "Me no kang chua, con ve home? I made sour soup. Are you coming home?" It hits harder than any club drop ever could. These remixes aren't here to impress. They're here to express, to confuse, to comfort, to unspool memories you didn't know were wound that tight. You close your eyes, letting the ambient static buzz in your ears like a night market winding down. No hooks, no choruses, just a drifting, remixed feeling that maybe, just maybe, you're not the only one searching for meaning in the noise. You're in a museum now, or maybe just scrolling through one online, but it doesn't feel dusty or formal. Instead, it's alive with motion, flicker, and sound. A virtual gallery labeled Remix Heritage, Viet Remix So Hoa, invites you in, and suddenly you realize Vietnamese remix culture isn't just reshaping music. It's starting to digitally preserve and reinterpret national memory. That's right, this whole remix revolution, it's now curating history itself. You walk past an interactive display. A 3D model of an old Hanoi street scene blurs and loops. Hover over a colonial-era photo, and it morphs into an animated short, scored by a down-tempo remix of Nyak Do. The message? The past doesn't just sit there. It pulses. You're witnessing remix as historical storytelling, not in textbooks, but through beats and pixels. It starts with small initiatives. Digital artists scanning old vinyl, uploading cassette tapes of folk songs, sharing remastered Kailung shows. But then remixers come in, adding gentle reverb,
layering ambient synths, maybe even including bits of street noise from modern Ho Chi Minh City. Suddenly, you're not just hearing the past, you're inside it. One project, called Ki Uk Den Tu, Electronic Memory, pairs archival recordings with futuristic visuals. An old poem from the Resistance War plays over grainy black and white footage, but the poem is sung by a synthetic voice, and the footage distorts into surreal color when the beat drops. Historians still argue whether these reinterpretations honor or distort the record. Some academics feel uneasy. Is a remix of Ho Chi Minh's speeches respectful or trivial? Others argue remixing is a living form of remembering, not less valid, just different. And really, who decides which version of the past gets to live?
A voice selling Bang Me that morphs into a lo-fi track as you walk. No narration, no facts on display, just immersion. And then there's TikTok. Yeah, the app where people usually dance or review skin cream. On Vietnamese TikTok, remixers are resurrecting whole generations. One creator overlays battle footage from Dien Bien Phu with a sped-up remix of a traditional march. It's moving, slightly strange, but it hits the algorithm. And suddenly, 500,000 teens are talking about colonialism again. You scroll to another account. It posts AI-animated portraits of Vietnamese literary figures, their mouths subtly moving, reciting lines of classic poetry. Only now, the background music is ambient breakcore. The effect is surreal and kind of beautiful. These remix historians aren't replacing the past, they're restaging it. Like taking old water puppet performances and adding subtitles and synthwave, or coloring black and white propaganda posters with pastel tones and glitch effects. One fringe sensation? A remix artist named Gospun, who digitally reconstructs Vietnamese ghost stories using audio clips, ambient horror soundscapes, and field-recorded whispers. His most famous piece, Ma Jo Quang Bin, takes a folktale and remixes it into an 11-minute sound poem, with actual winds from Quang Bin woven into the low end. You listen with your shoulders raised. And the audiences? They're not just passively watching. They comment, remix, reshare, recontextualize. Remix culture has become a massive loop. Art begets response, response becomes remix, remix becomes memory. A particularly poignant post you read, Gong tu về quê nội, you nghe bài này, con khóc như mình từng lớn lên ở đó. I've never been to my father's hometown, but this track made me cry like I grew up there. That's the remix effect. It builds places you haven't seen and gives you the nostalgia anyway. Museums are catching on too. The Vietnam National Museum of History has started hosting remix nights, where artists are invited to reinterpret artifacts with digital tools. Audio layering, 3D scans, motion reactive visuals. It's a party, but also a kind of ritual. People bring their grandparents, and everyone learns something sideways. And you can't ignore the diaspora's role here. Kids raised abroad remix old Tet footage into indie pop music videos. They animate family recipes into loops, setting them to sampled lullabies. These digital heirlooms spread faster than any documentary could. One Canadian-born artist made a 12-track album based entirely on her grandmother's voice, spliced into lo-fi rhythms, set against ambient Hanoi street sounds. The cover? A glitched-out photo of the family home. The title? Soothe Remix. You feel that in your bones. There's a growing movement to digitally safeguard these remixes. Archiving sites now preserve TikTok tracks, fan-made ambient poems, and sound collages that would have otherwise disappeared. Remixers tag their work with things like digital diaspora, remix design, and nostalgia wave. These are more than hashtags. They're cultural footprints. And still, the debate rages. Is it real history if you can dance to it? If you pitch shift it? If you loop your grandfather's voice into a trance drop? You smile, because deep down, you know it is. Because you're still listening. You're standing on a rooftop now, late night breeze against your skin, the city sprawling out beneath you like a neon circuit board. From here, you can hear multiple lives at once. A motorbike revving down below, a karaoke machine screaming out Chiao Koi Tuen, and somewhere in the distance, that familiar bass line thumping from a hidden speaker. You realize something important. Vietnamese remix culture isn't just a thing that happens. It's a way that people belong. This isn't about songs anymore. It's about identity. How young Vietnamese, both at home and abroad, remix their way into selfhood. You think about your cousin, born in California, who never quite clicked with Vietnamese school, but suddenly memorized entire verses of pre-war poetry because they appeared in a remix on SoundCloud. Or your friend in Da Nang, who hated old Nuc Vang until they heard it turned into a trap remix. Now, it's all they play. In remix culture, tradition isn't an obligation, it's an invitation. You get to pick up pieces of your heritage and stitch them into something that actually fits you. You remember one track called Ba Noi Nha Mang A, Dad said, just listen. A lo-fi beat that sampled a real father's voice message, mixed under a hazy instrumental. The artist captioned it, didn't know how to say I love you back, so I made this. The comments were full of strangers sharing their own voicemails. The remix had become a confessional. Historians still debate whether this generational remixing constitutes authentic culture or just highly personalized collage. But you know, the answer lies in that comment thread, because the thing about remixing your identity is that it lets you hold contradictions. You can be fluent in auto-tune but not in Vietnamese grammar. You can cry to Kai Luang while wearing Yeezys. You can have an American passport but a playlist full of Hot Trang Nonstop 2021. No one's checking your credentials. If you feel it, it's yours. And that's what makes this generation so special. They're not trying to preserve Vietnam in amber. They're remixing it so it moves with them. One fringe trend you've seen lately: Vietnamese language learners remixing kids' songs into EDM bangers. It started as a joke, Con Ko Bei Lun with a DNB beat, but now it's a subculture. Learners say the rhythm helps them memorize tones, and the joy, that's just a bonus. Meanwhile, diasporic DJs are remixing old family video soundtracks, adding beats under grainy VHS laughter, looping bits of Chuk Mung Nam Moi sung off-key at someone's living room altar. It's tender, it's strange, it's deeply personal, and thousands of people are listening. At a queer art night in Saigon, you watch a non-binary performer spin a set built entirely from remixed lullabies and pride speeches. Their opening track samples an auntie saying, "Gaisi mamak dove," before the beat drops into full
This is what remix culture does. It lets you answer the past with the present and shape both in the process. The boundaries dissolve. A 12-year-old in Bien Hoa makes a remix that ends up in a Berlin club. A TikTok from a French-Vietnamese cook sampling Nuke Mom sizzling in a pan gets layered over a Kai Lung monologue. An Australian Vietnamese violinist adds trap drums under a Tranquil Son melody and calls it a love letter to her mother. Even Vietnamese pop stars are leaning in. Instead of rejecting remixes, many now upload their stems, encouraging fans to twist and rework them. Make your version, they say, and people do, over and over. Remix culture has become the national sandbox, where identity isn't fixed, but fluid, looped, and full of echoes. You scroll past a clip, a Vietnamese dad in Canada reacting to a remix his daughter made of his karaoke performance. At first he laughs, then he tears up. He whispers, "Kai ne, la ma tung." This is strange, but full of love. Exactly. And this identity doesn't stop at music. Fashion, too, has caught the remix bug. Teens wear Aozai with Jordans. Designers embroider streetwear with calligraphy. One brand sells bucket hats with traditional proverbs stitched in fluorescent thread. Nothing's sacred, but everything's cherished. You see murals in Dalat where old revolutionary posters are redrawn as pastel pop art. You hear DJs spinning Vietnamese tongue twisters over ambient house. You pass by cafes where the drink menu is shaped like a poem. It's not nationalism, it's playful intimacy with your roots. An embrace, not a sermon. And perhaps most radically, remixing your identity teaches you not to fear contradiction. To say, I am Vietnamese and I am whatever else I need to be. A daughter and a drag queen. A coder and a Kai Lung fan.
a remix. Because in the end, your life is already full of samples. Childhood melodies, family voices, street sounds, memory fragments. All you're doing is adding your beat to the mix. It's twilight now. You're at the edge of a rooftop bar in Hoi An, the lanterns beginning to glow like soft little fireflies, and the sound system low-key pulsing with something familiar. You listen closer. It's a remix of Beodat Metroy, but slowed down, layered with ambient textures, and topped with a faint heartbeat-like bass. You don't know who made it. You don't need to. Because this, right here, is the future of Vietnamese remix culture. Anonymous, atmospheric, and everywhere. We've moved past the era of name-dropping DJs, TikTok mega hits, and non-stop edits. We're entering something more subtle now. A new phase where remixing is no longer a genre, it's the default language of how culture flows. This evolution wasn't planned. It just happened, quietly and all at once. You've probably already heard it without realizing. That chill version of a folk song playing in a boutique in Dalat. The soft, lo-fi Kai Lung loop behind a travel vlog.
The traditional festival drums pulsing under an indie beat in someone's Instagram reel. Historians still argue whether this phase marks the end of remix culture's energy, whether everything's just becoming background noise. But you're here now, and you know better. This isn't the end. This is the integration. Remix has left the club, left the screen, left the loud, obvious declarations. It's sunk into the cracks of daily life. One fringe signal of this? Even traditionalists are getting in on it. You scroll past a post by a monk at a remote pagoda, sharing a remix of his own chant, layered lightly with natural rain sounds and soft synths. The caption? De tung king ze tup jung hun, to help you focus while reciting. Another example, a Hatsam master recorded a session with a young sound designer. The final version, a mix of vocals, bamboo flute, and ambient city textures, then released anonymously on Spotify as Nyak Hop Bai, study music. Even education has absorbed it. Language learning apps for Vietnamese now come with remixed tone practice tracks, old grammar rhymes turned into hip-hop warm-ups, a remix of the months of the year, and somehow students love it. And branding? Oh, they've caught on. You see a new ad for a streetwear brand using a traditional funeral gong rhythm as part of a drum and bass remix. Is it edgy? Sure. Is it respectful? Surprisingly, yes. It was made in collaboration with a village elder from Hanam. He smiled in the BTS footage and said, "Ming la tu ya kong ye ting ne la du." As long as the kids still remember this sound, I'm happy. This new remix wave isn't centralized. It's decentralized. Decentralized, hyper-local, yet globally aware. A song remixed in Hue gets picked up in a Brooklyn cafe. A Vietnamese-Australian ambient producer collabs with a student in Ha Giang using just email and Dropbox. You find whole Discord servers where people swap traffic sounds from different Vietnamese cities like rare Pokemon. I got the Dalat bus horn. Who's got the Backdown morning market audio? And yet, with all this remixing, there's a strange piece. Because now it's not about going viral, or shocking, or inventing something from scratch. It's about tracing your echoes, hearing the past in your present, letting your culture breathe in your bedroom, your commute, your Sunday. You click play on a Spotify playlist titled Do Tin Choi Ableton. Our ancestors use Ableton, a cheeky name, but the tracks are pure art. Dan Trang loops, field recordings, 8-bit Buddhist chants. You smile, because you feel the remix culture settling into something gentle now, something permanent. And there's poetry in that. Vietnamese remix culture started loud. Bootlegs, jokes, party beats, teenage rebellion. But now it's softened, matured, grown reflective. Now you can walk through a night market and hear a street vendor humming a remixed lullaby playing from someone's Bluetooth speaker. You can scroll past a Gen Z creator showing their mom a remix they made of her wedding footage. You can lie in bed and listen to strangers cry into voice memos, looped and stitched into melodies that say, "You are not alone." This is the final remix. Not a track, not a meme, not a trend, but a feeling. Vietnam, heard through 1,000 speakers. Vietnam, looped and translated and echoed.
Vietnam, not as it was, but as it lives now. And it's humming in your headphones, right now, soft and low. Now it's quiet. Not silent, just the kind of quiet that hums gently in your ears, like the world has finally exhaled. You're lying there, phone on your chest, screen dimming, and somewhere in the background, a remix plays. One so soft, so layered with ambient breath, that it's hard to tell where the music ends and your thoughts begin. This is the final landing point of Vietnamese remix culture: intimacy. Because in the end, all the wild drops, meme flips, club beats, and experimental textures lead here, to a space where sound becomes memory, and memory becomes connection. You think back through all the places you've visited tonight: the street parties in Saigon, the basement setups in Berlin, the glitchy Kailung edits, the auto-tuned breakup voicemails, the remix of your own language learning failures into something oddly beautiful. Each one left a trace. You realize now, remix isn't just a style, it's a way of listening. And more than that, it's a way of surviving. Historians still argue whether this explosion of creativity is a golden age or a passing trend. But here's the truth. Trends fade. Feelings don't. And remixing has become how feelings travel, across generations, borders, platforms, and timelines. Even the language has changed. The word remix in Vietnamese used to be a niche technical term. Now it's a verb, a mood, a shared gesture. People say things like, "Tối nay remix lai buồn siêu nha." Let's remix things a bit sad tonight, like they're adjusting the tone of an entire day. And it isn't just music anymore. People remix TikTok sounds into daily affirmations. They remix their parents' cooking with vegan substitutions. They remix wedding slideshows with vaporwave. One guy even remixed his family's ancestry tree into a karaoke machine. You select a name, and it sings a verse in their honor. Unhinged? Maybe, but unforgettable. This is how we archive. Not with perfect files, but messy feelings. Not with clean cuts, but loops. You saw it in that remix of a street hawker's chant, transformed into a lullaby, or the mashup of wartime poems and nightclub beats, or the ambient sound of someone's grandma slicing vegetables, stretched into a 4-minute "That's something forgotten" just made someone laugh, or cry, or text their mom. It's when a friend sends you a track with no explanation, and you understand everything. It's when a comment says, "Toim Bill Mighty, I don't know why I cried listening to this," and someone replies, "Vio la Ming," because it's us. You let the final notes trail off, soft, echoing, looping one last time. The remix ends, but something lingers. And now, it's time to rest. Let your shoulders drop just a little. Feel the weight of everything you've heard slowly settle around you, like fog curling along the surface of a quiet lake. The lights outside your window are fading. The playlist is silent, but the echoes remain. The beauty of remix culture is that it never truly stops. Even now, as your eyes begin to close, pieces of melodies linger in the air. The gentle click of a cassette, the hum of a street lamp, the phantom memory of a voice, maybe your own, saying something tender, somewhere far back in your mind. Let it play. Let it loop. Breathe in, slowly. Breathe out, slower. You don't need to remember every beat, every lyric, every strange twist and turn of the stories tonight. They'll come back on their own when they're ready. Maybe in a dream. Maybe when you least expect it. For now, just know this. Your culture is alive. Your memories are alive. And even in a world of noise, confusion, and constant motion, you found a rhythm to call your own. The remix is still playing, somewhere, softly. And in the quiet, You are part of it. Sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams.